The family just get I go to more places.
Right now, I've been in the office today,
This is that.
and I said the office last Monday, and then the week before. Last weekend, this was so that's where I was at last week. And I've got to write you a letter. That is on the so we've done it. It's on my calendar. So,
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? So maybe I go to.
Glad you enjoy it.
One, two, three, four. We have a quorum. You don't have a quorum. I'm counting myself. Y'all have six of them. Three or four, like a four. Yeah, but I mean, it's still, it's a 6-member board. They got to have 3 or 4.
Yeah, well, I can't keep it on. That irritates me too much.
Well, just feel free.
Well, I hope it gets better.
Go ahead. Yeah, he shows you like cotton, you didn't think that was.
Well, it's supposed to be there.
That could be
Christian
nice.
says somebody will walk in.
Oh! Hey, where's the kid?
First thing in the book is you got
Is this
the
it?
council meeting, you got, on your book,
Oh, my book.
open your book, you got the cover sheet, tells you what's there, and then turn over right there.
Right there. All right. All right, call this meeting, I call this special call meeting to order.
And I call a meeting of the planning commission to order.
We just called the order without you.
Go ahead, you don't really need it.
So all we did is got the right there. Purpose of the meeting.
Mr. Cole up there. Mr. Brown said, everybody, joint meeting here with the planning commission to work on the zoning map. Mr. Osborne, are you ready, sir? Yes, sir. And just to pick up on what you said, Mr. Mayor, the purpose of being here is to move this along, hopefully to a conclusion tonight. And we'll start off in just a minute with Howard Ray picking up on the assignment that you gave him when you last met on September the 19th. And he will make his report. I will come back after your discussion and talk about next steps. But I will simply say that after your joint meeting, when you get through with that, and Mayor Harmon adjourns the meeting of the City Council, the Planning Commission then will move, you'll go through that door, and we'll prop that door open so you'll not be in violation of open meetings act. and you'll go back to our little kitchen area to finish your meeting, which will consist of making sure you're comfortable with whatever recommendations you make to the mayor and council for their possible action meeting on December 4th. And then you've got minutes of a couple of meetings, but that will be near the end of this. But the purpose of this meeting primarily is, like I say, Mr. Ray was given some assignments, and he's going to go over what you need to hear from him. I did include in the booklets for the planning commission and for the mayor and council some background information, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Ray to make his presentation.
Good evening, everybody. I will try to make this as short as I can. You know me, short means at least, 3 hours? Well, I'm just kidding. Hopefully it won't be that bad. To give you a quick little background of what I'm going to present before I dive into the details, there is one piece of paper that I didn't bring, but I'm thinking that Bill said he included it in your booklet. When we updated the code 05, 06, 07, I don't remember exactly when it was, there was a sheet of paper in the front of the new code that said this old zoning classification becomes this zoning classification. Okay, so in...
Let me just interrupt. If you will turn over and go over past my memo with the information from Bremen and Carrollton, and you will come to from our code section, and you will find Howard's talking about, keep going until you get to the code section. There you go. Right there. Right here. Yes. Everybody have that?
There you go. Yes. Here on there. That's exactly what I want to point out. Everybody got it? So what I want to point out specifically is that when it starts classifying the old, the largest residential lot was R40 as listed in this chart, okay? When in actuality, you have an RD at that one time called rural development. It was basically your agricultural, your 5 acres and large tracts, okay? So when we did this, I missed that, okay? For whatever reason, not sure, but so, not a lawyer, so I don't want to talk as a lawyer, but it can be argued that RD still exists, okay? Because it never was really abandoned. Now, I feel certain in the code somewhere it says that anything and everything left out is gone, okay? So what I'm going to present tonight is just simply a reinstitution of the RD. I'm going to show you in the 02 zoning map what was RD. I know which ones have changed and which ones have not through formal zoning petitions and votes. So I've got some maps that I'm going to show you. So basically, at the end of the day, I'm going to be recommending to the Planning Commission to reinstitute or readopt the RD district. All the properties that were originally RD and not been formally rezoned by the property owner through Planning Commission and City Council votes would still be RD. Now, the only thing that would really need to be tweaked, and I'm going to show you the old code, is where in the old code it says a buffer between like an RD and a R6. Okay, we still have an R6. Okay, all the different buffers between commercial and industrial, it'd all be the same. The only difference is that in the chart of buffers, we have an R4 that is not defined in the buffering. Okay, so that'll be something we'll just need to work out in later meetings. But my thoughts are for tonight, the thought, what I want to try to get us to is through the Planning Commission is to reinstitute the rural development classification and then take the original, or the, for lack of a better word, revert back the ones that are RD and were always RD and were never rezoned to anything else, that we inadvertently in our mapping system have moved up to R1. And I'm gonna show you that, okay? So that's really just a high level discussion of what we're here to talk about. I think I've got enough. If I don't, I apologize. These are some excerpts, it's not the entire zoning code, that discusses the different districts, but specifically this is any and all write-up relative to RD is in this document. How many am I short? I did 10 and it looks like I'm gonna be a couple short.
Here you go.
Well, I've got another copy. I got an original in my folder.
I've got one in the office.
So does everybody have one now?
They have one. Everybody got one?
So just really gonna walk you through that very quickly. And then, like I say, my thoughts are from there, I'll move to the map and show you what was originally RD and what I plan to recommend from there. So, as you see, Article 4 in our old zoning code basically just talked about the zoning districts. RD, R40, R14, R6, LC, GC, GI. So now today we have R40 went to R1, R14 went to R2, we created an R4, we have an R6, we have a light commercial, which I think is actually neighborhood commercial, we have a general commercial, we actually have a central shopping center district, which there's no properties in that. Then we have a heavy industrial and light industrial, and then we have our DCD. Okay, so just high level, that's sort of what we rotated into. RD, the district is intended to permit a combination of low density residential, various types, including agricultural activities, associated uses. The regulations of the district are designed primarily to encourage compatible relationship between agriculture and low density. I'm just sort of summarizing some of the data that you'll see in the old code. And the game plan would be that if this is more or less moved in the planning commission and voted in the council, then we would, my thoughts are we would then write up a formal section on R4, on the RD. We would integrate it into the overall zoning code, look for any areas that the overall zoning code needed to reference RD. Because right now we might talk about incompatible uses between commercial and residential, and it may name them all. Well, it's not going to name RD because in the new code there is no RD, right? So we'll need to update that. So at the end of the day, I believe we're going to be back here sometime in the spring for a full adoption of the new zoning code, just so that gives me time to figure out where there might be some minor grammatical edits we need to put in the zoning code. Flipping on over into what I gave you, Article 5, this sort of talks about the requirements for the rural development, the 5-acre minimum. You gotta have a lot width of 200 foot, front setback of 40 foot, 25 foot on local, side 20, rear 40, max height 35. The next page, 5.2, I'm sorry, that's not that. So then you get into your use charts, and so we have some new use charts. So we'll just need to go through our existing use chart and make sure that anything's listed here under RD is added to our use chart. But at the end of the day, we're basically going to mimic exactly what we have here in front of you from the old code. Or that's my recommendation. So there's multiple pages of that. And then we get back to, tell me if I'm going too fast, everybody staying with me? And then Article 6 talks about buffering. So, like RD up against R6 or limited commercial or neighborhood commercial, general commercial or industrial. This talks about buffering standards. So obviously, the more intense use, for instance, the multifamily, the commercial and industrial, they would be the ones that would have the buffering, okay? So the only thing we will need to think about as we incorporate this into our existing code is whether or not R4 needs a buffering. So R4 would be typically 10,000 square foot lot. And as you see on our R12, it was called, that's truly like 15,000 or 14,500 square foot lot now. It did not have a buffer. So the question is, do we really even want one at that 10,000? is there a difference between a 14,500 square foot lot and a 10,000? In my opinion, no, okay? That's just something we'll need to, walk through. I don't want to, it's not my intent to put any words in anybody's mouth or dictate what it should be. My gut feeling is you probably don't need a buffer there, but it's something we need to talk through. I think that's much more deeper dive than we need to go tonight. Tonight I think our intent is to clean up the concerns relative to the agricultural RD zone.
Excuse me, Howard,
Yes, sir.
that R4 zone, R4 subdivision does require 20% green space.
Correct.
So it would have to be buffered somewhere.
I guess what I'm saying is, let's say I'm in RD and you're gonna and somebody's gonna develop an R4 right against me. That R4 would have to do the buffering if you wanted to add one. The question is how much buffering. Like in some of these, from residential to commercial and industrial, the heavy intense is like 100 feet with a 20-foot planted berming and then 100-foot setback to a lot of stuff. One of the things that I encountered in the last 6 months in a new code that I kind of like and maybe want to pitch to you guys in the development code is that whenever a subdivision is done, the outer perimeter, 50 foot of it is common. No disturb, all the way around. So if I'm an existing landowner and development comes beside me, I know no matter what the development is, residential wise, I got a 50-foot buffer. Because I think what they have is 50 foot no disturb and then another 10-foot setback of improvement. So it can be yard, but it couldn't be a garage, it couldn't be a work shed, it couldn't be a house, it couldn't be a pool. So you'd really be 60 feet off that property. And the whole thinking I had there, what I like about it, is we're doing this 200 and some odd lot subdivision up against another 200 lot subdivision. So when I butt them up, it's got 100 foot between those homes. And I kind of like that. So it's just something I want to pitch as we move on into the development code, getting into rabbit holes, I'm going to pull myself back out of that. But that, it's just something we need to think about. Because if we did something like that, whether it be 20, 50, 40, 30, you at least develop some separation between adjoining subdivision, lots. It's just a thought. Here again, not something we have to decide tonight, but just planting some seeds. And so that's really the generals, specifics relative to the RD language in the old code. This was, I believe, from 1998 is when it was brought into being. So next thing I want to pass out is this is the 2002 zoning map. I'm just sort of walking you through how I've come through these things. I'll work my way through this. And this is coming around, but basically the real light colored, I don't know what you call it, cream colored. The cream colored on these maps are the RD. Okay. Now a couple of them have been, yes sir. I knew it was one short, no, it's good. Like I say, I got plenty at home. The cream colored ones are the RDs. Okay, just so that's your O2. So what I've done is I've taken.
Here you go, home.
Oh, you're okay. I got bills. Here, pass these for help. So what I did is I took that map that I gave you there, and I've taken the latest and greatest zoning map, and I have color-coded / hatched what properties are technically not been through zoning and would still be RD. So you sort of see, I sort of marked up, there is some odd ones that are hard to pick up on the map right here. Okay, that I just want to point out to some people. That the ones that are hard to see is these in here. And these right here are a little hard to see. In the corners, they're right around 78. And they sort of wrap around that commercial business that's out there. I'm trying to think the name of that business. That has like, I'm gonna call it a flea market. Like
Helping Master?
Say again?
It's Helping Master?
Yes. So there's a couple of pieces right there that were already original. Now, there are several that I noticed even on this map, that don't technically comply with RD. In other words, they're less than 5 acres. But just to make this process clean for right now, I've basically taken every area that was shown here as RD, that I know, in my opinion, for sure that was not rezoned through public notice, through property owner asking for it. I've taken it back to the RD on the new map.
Mr. Stebbins land here,
Yeah, his has never been RD.
it's never been on it.
Well, let me rephrase that. In the documents that I have, he never shows up as RD.
What is it always been?
This one here, in the O2, he shows up as R14, the R2. He shows up as 14.5. Now, that doesn't mean that he can't use it. I mean, there are things in the code that says it can be used for that. I don't remember offhand that it specifically says it can only have so many cattle, for instance. But I do not find, in other words, this is O2.
No, Dr. Yeah, that's okay.
And I'm not saying this is 100% right. I'm just saying this is the data I have.
I was just, that's the first thing that stuck out.
Yeah.
Stuck out at me right there.
Yeah. So I mean, I would need to dig into his specific issue to find out whether or not he needs to look at rezoning or ask for some type of special land use. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say he cannot do what he's doing because I don't know. But to me, he's been doing it forever. At least since I've been out here, he's been basically using that as a, I want to say he's got cows on him. In my opinion, that's a grandfather thing, and I do know our code covers grandfather. I don't remember the exact specifics of that, but I know there's a specific paragraph or two that defines grandfather and what their rights are. And I would feel very strongly that that would be definitely inside of that. Because I know that land's been used the way it's been used since I've been around. Okay, so I mean, that's pretty well the definition of grandfather in my opinion.
It'll be in a time.
Right, yeah.
Half the building
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah.
I know it's been like that since 64.
Right.
On this map here, Howard, the coloring is the same for R4 and R6, so it's not.
Well, the difference is, and you cannot pick it up in this, is the R6 has dots in it. If you can see it, you got better eyes than me. But in my original one, you can see that it has really, really faint dots in it. In other words, what I printed here is where I scanned in what I'm gonna call my original. And it's got, and like I say, it's got dots on it, but it's very, very hard to see even on the original. So that's a scan, then a print. So that's really what I'm recommending would be, for lack of a better word, an adoption to reinstitute the RD classification. And for the properties that I show on the new zoning map here that were originally RD, that no action had ever been taken on, would revert back to the original classification or the O2 classification of RD. I think that's the cleanest step we can take right now.
Okay, now to do any of that, do we need to have public hearings or anything, or we just?
Well, not a lawyer, okay, so I'm gonna make sure I preface that.
But we're not changing anybody's zoning, right?
Correct, because we never really did away with their RD.
Okay, how many of these tracts are less than 5 acres?
I have not counted, but I'm also 1, 2, 3. I would guess about 18. Just quick count real quick.
Less than 5 acres.
And that's a guess, because I mean, I'm going off of what I think that scale of that map is.
My question would be is, if we do the RP, that since it was, to your what you said earlier, it was omitted from the change. Therefore, some of the verbiage might say it was, anything that was omitted is wiped out. If that's the case, putting it back with regulations, updated regulations, and possibly for future land use, if it gets sold, it has to fit into the new zoning. So somebody just can't sell it and then keep using it for that. Because if we do that with that many different properties that way, that are less than 5 acres, I mean.
And so to me, this is how it's happened over the years. And this is in our code. The question is whether or not we haven't really enforced it. But technically, if you split a property at all, you're supposed to come back to the planning commission and go back to the council before you record. Now, that's from where we mimic the code before from Douglasville, okay? In a lot of communities, not all, but a lot of communities, if you split the property into 2 tracts, you can go down and record it. You never have to talk to the community. Now, that doesn't mean you can build on that tract that you split out, because that tract still has to comply with the zone. So in other words, if I had, let's say, 9 acres, I could go split it to 5 and 4, go down to the county, split it. But when I came in here to apply for that building permit on that 4 acres, they might turn me down because I'm not RD.
Well, what I'm getting at is if you had 2 acres and it's classified as RD when you do this, and that 2 acre gets sold as 2 acres, at that point, the new owner has to go by the new code, or is it going to be grandfathered in from now to the end of time, but as long as it stays the same acreage, it's going to continue to be that same? Because if the 2 acres doesn't fall into what we're going to say it's got to be 5 acres or more, then all these 18 or so properties would be non-conforming forever. So I don't know how do we handle something like that?
I'm not sure, to be absolutely honest with you. I mean,
because at some point they got to get it in code.
right. Well, in the past, they were RD and still non-conforming. Because that could be the other option is for, is so that another option is that you say anything under 5 acres would stay R1 and everything over 5 acres would revert back to RD. That means it's just an option.
Yes, sir, go ahead. The reason we're here tonight, of course, is because you felt like that we needed to take a look at what happened to the RD and to do something about it. And I think in doing something about it, whatever you do, you want to be sure that it will stand the test, the smell test, the review test, the legal test. So I think whatever you decide to do, that we'll have to look and see how soon after this meeting. I know that there is a period of time before the planning commission can take action on something. And we'll have to just map it out. My assumption is that we can get all of this done before the end of the calendar year. But I don't think we can get it all done by December the 4th and make sure that it will stand the test. And you don't want to go through all of it and not stand the test.
And that was one of my thoughts is that, just here again, I think it's something we need to talk with the attorney. Worst case, we do the public notice, the public hearing and everything civic to adopting the RD, adopting the new map, or these properties going back to RD, go to the planning commission meeting, and then, like I say, then into the council. I mean, that's a question that I don't know that answer, I told Bill when we talked about it several weeks ago, I was like, I could argue with myself the specific point was one, we didn't get rid of RD, so does it still exist? We never had an up-to-date zoning map, so does it still exist? I think to be safe was, my position was for us to go back to this exercise, to dot the I's across the T's, to be, in my opinion, the most protected.
gonna be the safest way because it never was changed correctly. People didn't come up and ask about this. People weren't notified about any of this, so the simplest way would be to put it back like it was and then go back to work on another one if that's the way the group wants to do. That'd be the simplest and most cost-effective way to solve this. Mr. Walden?
I think we need some large tracts of RD. You know, we've got some people here who have some livestock, but I don't think we need small tracts of RD to where people can put livestock and any problem with the neighbors, you know, on a half-acre lot or 1 or 2 acre lot.
Well, and I would,
We got to control that.
yeah. And I would agree, that's why typically zoning's done. I think the good thing that I would point out, because like I say, I looked at this earlier, the good thing about that is in each one of those cases, if you look, they're actually embedded around RD, except up there by the school. They have the school adjacent to it. But you know, most of the small tracts I'm gonna call are embedded. You know, most of those 18 are right there off of Rainy Road, north of the school. The school's in purple, and that's where I counted probably more than half of them. And then there's some here on is it Asbury? Is that how you say it? So that's the predominance of it. So I think the good thing is it is more or less isolated and for lack of a better word, contained within the holistic RD areas versus being randomly out in the middle of, let's say, an R14 area or a PUD area. Does that make sense? I mean, I do think it's something that we need to address. I don't disagree with what you're saying, either one of you. But I think for maybe this baby step, that at least we haven't created anything because it is more or less contained within that holistic area.
Well, can't we do this now and then later do a code section that says that you must have 5 acres to
And you can
have livestock?
and you can do it as part of the You can do it as part of the development code, as well as part of if there's a sale and you're less than 5. You know that it's got to come in as an R1. I mean, there's a lot of different. I don't know what's the best way to do that, but I think you could restrict. In other words, what I have historically seen is that if you have 5 acres or larger, and in a lot of places it's 10 acres, you can have this many head of cattle. Okay, and then if you get less than 10 acres, 5, you can have this many head of cattle. And then like 5, it's usually 5. Usually 5. I want to say it's usually at 5. It's like 1 horse, 1 cow, you know, in other areas. So you couldn't have like a mini chicken farm on top of a 3-acre property.
Well, see, like I say, before, a lot of this stuff was grandfathered in, and I was here when we first done it, in first zoning. And when we start changing people's property without them being notified and being on board, to me, you're asking for trouble. That's my opinion, Mr. Osborne.
Yes, if you look down at the bottom of on this page 38, 35, you'll see it says zoning district. And I think when this was done, that certainly they were not forgetful of what we've been talking about, because the R1 single family detached, as you can see, just reading it, the R1 zone is established to protect and promote the emphases on suburban urban development rather than rural activities. However, it is recognized that agriculture and the raising of poultry and livestock may still be an activity in this district, and provision is therefore made for limited forms of such activity with appropriate safeguard for nearby residences. So there certainly was an awareness of, but there was a desire to keep the agricultural option, including livestock. And so
I think as you look at whatever you may do, they did have some obvious awareness of what they were doing to retain that as an option within the R1, within certain limits.
But, you know, that's pretty much what I have. You know, what are the proper steps? I'm not exactly sure. But I just, you know, this is sort of how I recommend us going through this next baby step, you know, just to try to address the significant issue that was raised, to get us to the point where we can adopt a final zoning map and then move into the development code, whatever zoning text that needs to be upgraded, as well as in the future land use map.
So you're saying we need to get back to where we were and then start over?
For this area, right? That's kind of my thoughts, is, you know, when I looked at doing this method versus going in and saying, taking Bremen or Carrollton's, for instance, or Carroll counties, and starting from scratch, then I think, you know, we're going into an area that was not already established. And so to me, I think trying to go back and reestablish what existed is a smarter path from a challenge standpoint.
So are we gonna have some kind of control if somebody wants to put livestock on a 1 acre lot?
I have to admit, I don't know the zoning code, every letter of it, but I would think yes, that there's gotta be something in there that, talks about, even in the old code, if you're less than that 5 acres.
Yeah, in other places, they have, have to have 1 acre, 1 fenced-in acre per animal.
I was reading that in the Bremen code.
Yeah,
Carrollton code or something.
Carrollton
That's
code.
not- that's
And
not
that's how
here.
they're
Well,
but we could adopt that.
In the Green Code, they have it where you can't have any kind of livestock within 25 feet of any line, any property line.
Right.
That way you're not backing your chicken house up to your next door
Right.
neighbor's property. That's kind of, I think, you know, stuff like that. I think that, like you said, we get it back where it needs to be or whatever, but as we're going and adopting different codes, I think we need to look at other surrounding areas, what
Yes.
it's doing to.
And I think some of that can be put into the development code, which would be your development standards, which will talk about, you know, what I'm gonna call your building envelopes, you know, your setbacks, things like that. You know, whether or not it's a zoning code or a development code, I'm not sure. I mean, at the end of the day, is my intent, when we get the development code ready to be adopted, it will be adopted as the development code, but as a subsection of the zoning code. Does that make sense? So therefore, it would technically be a matter of law, so to speak, that sets the standards part of the zone. And isn't that the way Douglasville did it, Bill? At least that's what I remember. In other words, it is a standalone document, but technically it is a subsection of the zoning code. Because we don't want it to be a situation where a developer can argue, well, that's not a matter of law.
All right, so anybody got any questions for Mr. Rhodes? Mr. Oscar, report on schedule follow-up of the planning commission, city council meeting.
Yes, sir. I guess 2 parts in my report to you. I'll get one of them out of the way real easy, and that is, if you remember back in the early fall, you had 2 tasks in front of you. One was to adopt the current zoning map that would be accurate, and the other was to prepare a future land use map. In mid-September, you decided to put the future land use map in a holding pattern until you dealt with the current zoning map. And I would say we'll need to keep that future land use map in that holding pattern until sometime early next calendar year when you're ready to start working on that. I think before you conclude this meeting tonight, I just want to be sure that
I understand the next 2 or 3 steps you want to take with the current zoning map. So if someone wants to be the one, or Howard, you want to come back, I just want to be sure I understand. We've got a zoning map at the moment. It says what it says. We've got the ordinance at the moment. It says what it says. With the concerns that you had on looking at being more explicit, put it that way, with certain things on agricultural type lots, estate size lots, and livestock, as to where do you want to go next to get to where you eventually want to end up? And comments have been made, which I think are well founded, that while we may look at this as correcting some oversights from years ago, we may look at it as some technical corrections. You do need to be sure that as you go through this process, that the public goes along with you, so that even if you have virtually nobody who comes to whatever public hearing or hearings you have, you would have completed any required steps of that nature.
I don't want to get into a situation where we're changing someone's zoning without sending them proper notice and having public hearings.
Do it that way, sir.
And this would make that,
That's
this
right.
would make that happen, right?
I think if we
went back.
If we do it that way, if everybody's agreeing with what Mr. Walden has said, that gives us really the steps that we would need to go through in the process. I think the one thing all of you seem to be in agreement with where you want to end up. The question is what do we have to do to end up where you want to be, and to be able to hold that fort once you get there.
So this would be, this would be the basis. I mean, this would be, leave it as it is now.
It is what it is at the moment, so.
I don't understand that. Is this the way it is now?
No, whatever, forget what we've been talking about here, but I mean, 6 months ago, you started to correct errors.
Right.
Errors that existed simply because things had not been recorded properly. And we basically have completed that task.
Right. But this, I'm asking, this is the bone of contention, right?
Yeah.
And so this takes it back and leaves it exactly like it was. So in other words, if I were to, at some point in time, vote for this, it would, this is the way it was when we started this process, this is the way it is now.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Let me see if I think y'all are talking the same language.
I think we're too, I just want to yes or no.
Bill, you tell me if you think I say this is correct. What Bill's trying to say is, if you look at the way the zoning code and map is interpreted today, all these are R1s. So technically, in his mind, we're changing from what it is today back to that. I think you're saying the same things,
Right.
but the way he's saying it is that if you really look at the letter of the thing, there is no RD as of today. So all these are technically R1, could be argued. And so we would be making a change from where we are today to incorporate this RD.
But if we accepted it that way, may I want to, because I'm trying. So I thought that the whole problem was the definition of the 5 acres and the farm. I thought that's where the snag was, that we had corrected everything else, but that because there was no designation for agriculture, that these places that were currently agriculture would no longer be. And this would take it back to the agricultural like everybody thinks it is now. So that if I were to vote for this at some point in time, then what you're saying is that we'd have to go back in here and work through where these little subdivisions are to get that corrected.
Yes and no. First would be, yes, because I think you jumped into the less than 5 acres. So
Yeah.
I think the first thing is you have to adopt RD,
Right.
zoning ordinance.
Okay.
Right? Then you would adopt this updated map with these shown as RD. But you can't adopt this map without the ordinance.
So,
Then the next step would be looking at the ones less than 5. To me, that would be spring, early summer.
so we are making a change that people wouldn't understand if they were to come in here and look. They would say, okay, my property was R1 and now you made it RD. What is the difference in the two? That would be the first, if I own land anywhere, that would be the first question I'd ask. Then I would say, okay, if you've done that, then you've changed without giving me notice that this has been changed.
That could be argued, yes, sir. In that we didn't have an RD, right? So if you were RD and that was the least intensive, and when we rewrote the code, we arbitrarily moved you into the least developed R1 zoning code. Even though we never had a map, you know, I would argue, and I'm not a lawyer, but I would argue that legally you had become an R1 by us adopting that zoning code. So it could be argued that now we're taking R1 back to RD.
If I may, Mr. Osborne just stated, and you'd mentioned that the RD was removed and it was a mistake, and it was all classified R1. Mr. Osborne just commented that there's verbiage in the R1 description that talks about allowance for agriculture. So somewhere in the chain, it got accepted as agriculture. Now, what that definition is, to what degree, to my question would be, is there a reason we have to change it back to RD if the R1 is including what used to be RD in it?
And that would
I
be.
don't know how it was changed, what's the verbiage?
And so that would be another option, because me and Bill debated this, but that'd be the other option is, instead of going through this map amendment, do you define what that allowance is for 5 acres and larger in R1? And that would be another path.
And what I would suggest is that might be easier pill to swallow, because it's already R1, and we don't have all these, if you have, within R1, if you're so big or whatever, this is what, you know,
What's allowed?
that would be, I think, would be an easier path than going through, like you're saying, having to make a public change and send out notice to everybody that they're no longer R1, they're going back to RD and all this other stuff. I don't know.
It'd just be an amendment to the zoning code.
It'll be easy.
See, I contend that these RDs that were changed to R1 were done illegally because no one was notified. And this is where the problem is going to arise if it don't revert back to RD.
Did, okay.
And
Which means
Then-
that a farm
then-
would be defined as 5 acres?
then these other little spots right in here, the way to handle this, I think, would be contact them and see if they wanted them to be R1 or whatever.
Right.
But if we don't put these back to RD like they were, and put that classification back in there, in my opinion, there's gonna be a whole lot of problems that arises from this. And I mean, zoning stuff has been taken to court, and the whole thing has been thrown out, before, and that's not my intent to do away with the zoning up here. But I think that this stuff has to be done correctly when you're going to go through and redo the whole city. Had somebody notified me and a bunch of these others, and probably Mr. Stedham, down here, that your property is about to be changed to an R1, I think you would have had people up here checking on this. But ultimately, I still believe that a government of the people and for the people, and you, in turn, you try to make this place better. You try to leave it better than you found it. But, you know, people are having it tough, some of them. They go to work, they mind their own business, and they pay their bills. And when you have a bunch of officials that's gonna come in there and change their property around without them being informed, I just see a big problem arising from that.
So this would fix that, just like this.
I would say that it would fix most of the problem, is to put it back like that and then go back and.
Well, that was my
fix it.
question, that
Fix
gives
it.
the answer to the
Fix
question.
the part
If that's the way it was, then we fix it.
that wants to be fixed. A lot of people would probably like to have their small acreage turned into R1. You know, I don't know. But then there's some of us that have bought ours to be agricultural, and we haven't petitioned the council nor the planning commission to have this changed. And there again, my offer still remains. If people wouldn't get rid of me, they'd buy my property at fair market value and I will move. But, you know, some people may not feel that way. And that's just my 2 cents, you know, and yes, I know that I went away and minded my own business and paid my bills and took care of my stuff and didn't bother anybody. And that's the way Mr. Stedham's down there has been operating, and his whole family over the years. And if he wants his to be R1, that's fine with me. But I don't want mine to be R1. I want it to be like it was when it was created, and nobody put up no signs it's going to be changed, and nobody asked me, you know, to change it. And the guy next to me that bought the Hoyt Kenny farm over there at the, I guess on the courthouse steps or from the bank or somewhere, he's planted a bunch of trees. The Forestry Commission has gone in there, and they have planted a bunch of trees, and I don't know that he wants his to be R1 either, but that's just my 2 cents, but they can do whatever they want to do and go from there. Yes, sir, Mr. President.
So the answer is, this is putting it back the way that it was. And this is what we need to do. We fixed these others that we knew that we had the documentation. This is where the only problem is. So that would take care of the problem if we just adopt this.
I think that's
That's a good
that's the
yes.
cleanest.
That's a good
I think
yes.
that's the cleanest, yes.
All right, gotcha. All right. Just as long as I can explain it when I walk away, that's all I'm gonna do.
I didn't bring enough math, so.
I'm gonna ask you for one.
I didn't have one for me, I'd give them all.
Mr. Shackelford, you had your hand up at one time. Did you have something?
No, I was just, I agree with what you're saying there. The only question I had was because it was, you're looking at this and saying, okay, used to be what it was, and somehow when the paperwork and the changed, that designation went away. So you've got these R1 now classified areas that can be either or at this point that we're looking at. And so what I would recommend, after just contacting every owner that has any one of these properties, is anything that's classified R1 right now, that's 5 acres or more, after you contact the owner, possibly move that to R&D. Anything that's under it, talking about leaving it R1. Because you talked about the legalities. The legalities that was never possibly changed correctly, but somehow it did get changed. So there's legalities from the other direction too. Because because we're talking about 2002, 2017, so things have, what about all the stuff that's changed in that time period? You know, so it's not as, it's a lot more complicated than that. Look.
I mean, it seemed pretty cut and dry to me, like if this is the way it originally was, and then we illegally changed it to R1, and nobody came out. Nobody came up here and said, hey, I'm sure there's some new property owners that probably purchased property between 02 and 17 that thought they were buying R1. But, I mean, no, we don't have any issues with any of the property owners, do we? Nobody's ever been up here screaming and yelling that I want to raise cows. I can't. But we're making an issue out of a non-issue. We just put it back to exactly what it was, you know, to answer Richard's question. This is what it was, to make it what it was, because we don't really have anybody that's gonna even have a problem with it changing. And
Because
if
that's
they
the way they
do,
thought it was to begin with.
yeah. And if they do,
Address it.
I mean, if there's no difference in the two.
Yeah. Because it doesn't change, this designation doesn't change the taxes, doesn't change the land use that much at all, because the people that are in these areas pretty much, well, it's either trees or patch of land or, other stuff. So it doesn't change anything. And if we take it back to the way it was before it got left out, I think the lawyer would agree that would take everything back legally and we could move forward there like with all the little small pieces inside the city to see what we can do about these. Which, these probably got houses, walkways, trees, on them now. There's no animals that I know of inside this area. There's animals here, here, all around that perimeter, but not on the inside.
And I would say this, Mayor,
Yes, sir.
just me and Mr. Stedham were talking, I think just like you're saying with the ones that are RD, that necessarily may want to be R1, because of things, I think that's something we'll reach out to, same thing with Mr. Stedham, he shows out a note too, is, R2. Okay, well, it's always been that. So what I told him, I was like, once we create this RD, my suggestion to him is that we would work with him to come back in for rezoning to the RD, and, and then that way it would be more consistent with what's actually there. But, I told him basically, in my opinion, since it's already documented on 02, I can't change it. I just don't think that, because I'm not privy to it ever not being R2. That's the only documents I have, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't make that map right, but it's what I have to start with, if that makes sense. So I think there will be 3, 4, 5, 6 different tracks that we have to address. But I think this is the cleanest step in my opinion. It's the most defendable in my opinion.
Okay. I guess we're ready to adjourn this meeting here. Yes, sir.
Other thing, once you adjourn the city council meeting, as I mentioned, the planning commission, if you'll go back through this door, back to the little break area, and Dwayne Everhart will be going back there with you. You've got 2 sets of minutes we need you to take action on, as well as any other discussion you want to have in terms of recommendations to be passed on to the mayor and council. And then when you finish that, Mr. Chairman, you will be adjourning that meeting.
All right. This meeting adjourned. Y'all can go have it.
Yeah, I will if you need me to.
No, I think we're just going to take this question.
I don't know. I'm sitting there thinking, I was scared to do something. I got scanned in about next week. But I don't know that I ever scanned it. I did this when I was walking out the door trying to figure out if I should take this. No, well, like I say, that's what I do.
When we get in, no, oh, yeah. So this would be.